Welcome back, all. Daz from Model Techniques. This series we've got Dave Abeles back to talk about the Onondaga cutoff and also him as a content creator. So he's obviously written some lovely books for Model Railroader, Kalmbach Productions, and also Model Railway Craftsman. So we sort of dive a little bit deeper into his inspiration and how he goes about doing that. So don't forget to subscribe, like, click that little bell icon to be notified of upcoming content. Also, I've got a Patreon page. All these links are below. Every little bit counts. A big shout out to the super fans out there who contribute to my channel. So without further ado, let's get started. Up and running is MRT scale print. So if you want Craftsman quality 3D printed prints, email me below. Welcome aboard, Dave Abeles, and thanks for coming on to Model Techniques today or this evening in your part of the world.
That's correct, Daz. It's good to see you and hear you live. Here we go.
Yeah, here we go. So if you haven't heard the name Dave Abeles, in the model train world, I don't know where you've been right now, but for those people that haven't, he's got a YouTube channel, he's got a blog on the Onondaga cutoff, and also a Facebook, Conrail's Onondaga cutoff by Dave Abeles. I'll put all the links below. There's some great little resources here and some awesome little videos you'll see playing in the background. So we're going to talk about Dave Abeles, the content creator and author, because there's three parts to you. There's obviously your work life, but we're talking about your trains. So there's the OC is very well, from my point of view, documented, and it's out there, and it's just an awesome layout. And I want to get involved one day from my part of the world to run a train, and hopefully I won't do a Martin Jenkins and smash it into something else. But sorry, Martin.
That was more our fault than Martin's, but it's poor Martin gets busted constantly about this.
Yeah.
You guys are terrible.
So that's what us Australians are about. So we're like getting stuck into a ribbing each other, and he.
It's wonderful, yeah.
Being that he's a Queenslander as well, so there's a big sort of between. I'm in the southern states, he's sort of the northern, so it's.
Oh no, for sure, and it's again my uncle, my dad's brother, my dad's only brother actually emigrated from the United States in about 1968 to the Adelaide Hills, and he lived in Aldgate for most of his life down there. And so I actually visited several times before. We even again, it's if I go to Australia again, it's going to be a totally different trip because I got to come see all y'all.
You do, you do.
Great.
Well, we're meant to come to.
It's a beautiful part of the world.
We're meant to come to your part of the world last year, but obviously something happened which we won't lament on. So, Aldgate, just to give you some sort of ideas, about 20 minutes north from me. So it's not
Such
not
a
far at all.
World, my friend.
My kids do their dance lessons over at Aldgate. So
I'll send you a link at some point. But I actually, when I was there, I did take some train pictures.
Yeah, nice.
Thanks to my auntie's brother who lived down closer to town.
Right.
And when there was a grain train coming up the hill, he called and said, "Oh, it's got the old kind of engines too."
Yeah, nice.
So I went out and got those wonderful cab units.
Yeah.
Several of them leading in the G&W paint scheme coming up the hill through the old train station there.
Lovely.
Right in Aldgate. It was awesome.
Yeah. So not often do I have someone known about our railways all that much, even though it's quite odd. I don't actually model Australian railways. I model European railways. Don't know why. It's just what I got myself into.
We all
European steam.
It's okay.
Yeah. All right. Now, my apologies if I don't get all of these. So, to give people some sort of idea what you've done in your content world. So, you've done Railroad Model Craftsman front page, the OC cut-off in September 2020. You did a Model Railroader front cover also, Modelling After Dark, September 19. How to set up remote ops earlier this year in February in Model Railroader. And we'll obviously click through some of these, the pictures there. Oops.
Yep.
Let's go back.
We had the Forbidden Places piece that was right after the remote piece.
Yep. And then how to build a custom locomotive, which is, I think, your latest, which is out now, is my understanding. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah, it actually arrived 2 days ago in the mail.
There we go.
And there it is.
Yeah, it's
and
the one.
Oh my gosh. Ever since I was a young man, I hoped, because I remember there's a guy named Mike Tylick, who I've never met, lived up in New England at the time. And he and his son built a module on which they had it, they called it was it M&H Junction? I forget the name of the actual article, but it was a model railroad front page where they had, a Conrail unit on the cover, and I said, boy, I would love to get Conrail on the cover someday. And here we are, 20 years later or so, and very grateful for the opportunity. The guys at Kalmbach have been good to me, and so is Otto.
Yeah.
Otto Railroad Model Craftsman is class act, and I'm looking forward to being back in that magazine as well. Reportedly, I'll have a couple articles in that next year that have already been submitted, and so keep your eyes out for an article on the M&E on the short line interchange here on the Onondaga cutoff, the OC, and another one hopefully on rail fanning by minivan. Otto specifically requested that I put together an article based on the fascination with this minivan, which of all things on the layout, Daz, I did not think that the minivan would be the most important thing in these Facebook Live videos, but here we are.
I think the reason when I heard that story on Modeller's Life podcast back probably last year sometime now, I think everyone can relate with the story. It's you with some family members, I think of your brother, if I remember correctly, and also some good friends.
Yep, some good friends. Yep.
Going rail fanning. And I think people can sort of, we've all grown up around some sort of thing. My grandparents, you probably watched trains from there when you came to Australia, which is the bottom of the grade, just out of Adelaide, just as they're chugging up the hill into the Adelaide Hills, a place called Lower Mitcham. I used to go with my grandpa and watch the trains trundle by. I think everyone who's a train buff can relate to that story, and I think that's probably why it's taken off so much, to be quite honest with you. So
I appreciate it because there is something about being trackside and having the freedom of a vehicle, and it doesn't matter the vehicle. I'll tell you what, I've taken minivans where minivans have never gone before.
That's fantastic.
But some places where I had a hard time getting back out. But but this is how young men learn.
Yeah.
We learn by making mistakes and continuing on. But to be trackside at these mountain grades, and this is something. There's a lot of yes. And was there more variety in the 90s? Yes. Was there less globalization? Yes. Was it more exciting? I think in some ways, there certainly can be an argument that people could find it more exciting. Do we miss steam locomotives? Obviously, but there's still something in my soul that when I see a headlight, my heart skips a beat, and I want to see what it is.
Yeah.
When you're trackside and you watch one of these giant SD70 ACEs or the modern Tier 4, the GEVOs, the GE Evolution series, they don't sound as good. They're all the same. You hear all the tired critique, but it's still awesome to watch a railroad work because it's still people trying to circumvent gravity, trying to move these giant machines. Which literally drive the nation's economy, the world economy. It's still a very compelling story. It's still exciting. And so to sit trackside and feel that rumble of the steel wheel on steel rail and the screech, the whine, it's still a compelling thing. And so I hope so. I hope the minivan, helps to link people to that because it's a great memory.
Yeah, definitely. And as I said, people can relate to that. So now obviously on screen, we got your first full-featured, I suppose, full-length book. We call it what you will. It's the Guide to Signals and Interlocking.
Yes.
I'm still yet to get my copy because it's not here in many bookstores in Australia, or my model stores anyway, but I will get one, definitely. So then I might send it to you, and if I can get you to sign it. And then send it back to me.
I would love to. Just make it part of your luggage when we see each other for the first time.
Definitely.
I'd be happy. I'd be honored to sign it for you, Daz.
Thank you.
And it's, to me, this is the culmination of the signal system, which of course is built upon reliable block detection. It's built on good track work. It's built on, all the things, the layers that make a layout work. And that's the approach that we took with the book. But that's a view there at CP 280 of a eastbound train in the late afternoon, I would say early evening as the sun starts to set in the west. So you get the backlit glint shot. And I think it does a nice job of illustrating what an interlocking is and how that all comes together.
Yeah, sure. So how did the idea for this book come up? Was it something that you thought you've approached Kalmbach? Please tell me if you can't answer this, but
no, it's
how did you come up with the idea?
So what we ended up doing was there's a variety of operating groups in the United States, and one of them in the Northeast between the Washington, D.C. area, which is about 200 miles south of us along the coast, and the New York City area is what they call a November interchange. And so some of the fellows that have been in the hobby for longer than I, these are, this is the Jerry Diedzicks and Tony Coasters and Perry Squires and Ted Pamperns of the world up here. And then down in D.C., some other very well-known names, Bernie Kempinski, Matt Thompson with his Oregon Coast Railway, Paul Dolkus, who was in Model Railroader throughout the 80s and 90s. And so there's a lot of high-powered names out there, up here with Jerry Diedzik, who's the current operations column modeler for Model Railroader, and Tony, of course, the Trains of Thought. It's a really neat back and forth between these two powerhouses of model railroading.
Sure.
So the dumb luck of having been born in New Jersey and settled down here, despite job offers for Norfolk Southern and Atlanta and some other places around the country, the circumstance is sort of incredible. So back and forth with this operating group. One night after the operations, there's always a social gathering. Everybody's having a glass of wine or some beer. There's a barbecue and what have you. And Tony Custer walks up to me and says, "Dave, have you heard from Model Railroader?"
Nope.
I said, "No." I said, "Should I have?" He's like, "Well, you remember Eric White? He was the editor for the Model Railroad, the setter guy for the Model Railroad planning piece. That was my first ever published work on model railroading. Was in Model Railroad Planning 2018, which is edited by Tony Custer. So I did a piece for him, thanks to Jerry. Jerry put me in touch with Tony, and Tony said he wanted to take a look at something I had to offer. So that's how we got started. Jerry's been to the Onondaga Cutoff a bunch of times. He's actually a regular in my operating crew, which is awesome. The guy that writes the operations column for Model Railroader lives 11 miles west of me.
Nice.
How does that happen in life? It's just luck. But Tony says, well, Eric's going to be in touch. Kalmbach is looking for a book on signals, and I know I turned you down with your idea for an interlocking piece for model railroad planning. The reason I turned you down is that I think that piece would be better as a full book. And I said, Tony, thank you. I really do appreciate it. However, there's much more qualified people. Dad, between you and me, I wired the signals here based on the direction of a signal professional who did the programming.
Yeah.
So it was a team that built these signals.
Yeah.
And so Tony said, well, Dave, I don't think you're understanding. This needs to be a book, and you're the guy to write it. I said, Tony, look, I really appreciate it, but I've just, I'd rather write some articles for the magazines at this point. Like, I'm not sure if I'm ready to write a book. And he looked at me and he just paused, and he's this tall, stoic character, a little smile on his face. And he says, I worked for Bell Labs for 20 something years, from the early 80s until right about 2000 or 18 years, whatever it was. And he said, I spent my career there translating engineer speak into something that was acceptable to the general public. And you've got what it takes.
Nice.
So you should give it some serious thought. And I said, yes, sir. I mean, what are you going to say? When the guy you've looked up to your whole life says, no, you're wrong, just write it. I said, okay. And so Eric White, again at Kalmbach, was my editor for the book. And just a patient educator, a very gentle guy, again, about my age, about our age. And really helped me through, how we put this together. And we built a proposal, and there's a whole outline and a pitch that you put together. Even though they approached me, I had to go through the process of writing a pitch and getting the approvals.
Sure.
And then it was time to submit between 25,000 and 35,000 words and 200 photos by a deadline, which was about 18 months out. And I got to work on it. And even though I was working on it the whole time, fits and starts, but you keep working on it. You think about it, it comes and goes. It's always a push for those last couple of weeks to get it off your plate.
Yeah.
Doing the writing and the photographs is a lot of work. Sure. It's a lot more work than I expected.
Yeah.
But I think the product speaks for itself. And Eric and Kalmbach did an unbelievable job laying this thing out.
Yeah.
And, I fed it to a couple of my close friends here on the OC, one of whom is a lawyer by profession and does contract editing and knows how to read technical content and edit it. And he's been a breath of fresh air. Joe Relation, gentleman who's a regular yard master here. Rich Wisniewski, whose name you've heard for the AML, through the Modeler's Life. A couple other people, some signal professionals, read it through, and they gave me feedback and wording changes. And I think this is unclear. It'd be better this way. And Daz, I think we came up with something that works.
Nice.
I think it does show the different layers that exist for a good signal system, and it lets guys take it as far as they want to go, and guys and ladies, it's really an opportunity for us all to come together and see how you can get started with this if it's something you find interesting. So
sure.
I'm thrilled with the success of it. I'm shocked at how quickly. I'm really humbled and shocked at how quickly it sold out. I did not. I mean, for a niche of a niche, I didn't expect it. But Lionel he'll be busting me till the day we're no longer able to talk, because he was like, Dave, it's going to be gone in less than a year, and if it's not, I'll buy the rest of them. And I said, Lionel, come on, okay, I'll take you up on that.
Yeah.
And sure enough, it was gone. Boom. So, yeah. So really very, very grateful for the success of it so far, and looking forward to the future. There's another book coming along here. Hopefully, there's some deliberations between me and Kalmbach to do a second book. This one would be on yard design and operation.
Right.
And hopefully we come to terms with that here in the next couple of weeks, and I'll be off to the races, and in a couple of years we'll be talking again.
Yeah, lovely. So the book is Signals and Interlocking, that is. North American influence, obviously, because that's your part of the world that you're. Can it sort of be the way it's been written that some of the themes and techniques can be adapted to other parts for signaling systems for other systems throughout the world?
Yes. And I think what's most exciting about signaling and about railroading in general, if you look at the history, so much of this was a genesis between Great Britain, and England. England had the first railroads. The first, actually, as we know them, with the steam locomotive and the whole nine yards. America followed suit very quickly, and it was those two nations in the Industrial Revolutions, which then spread to Germany and France and some other places around the world. And you have this worldwide movement towards rail transportation. So signaling came about because of the number of problems that the overwhelming success of railroading in all these different places. So the patents were actually held. The first interlocking machine actually wasn't even in the United States. It was in Great Britain. And we talk about that in the book. There's a whole history that goes into the idea of interlockings and why they're important and how they provide for safety across the ways. And the fundamental of the interlocking is the idea that you can't line conflicting routes, which is based upon the machine knowing where trains are.
Yeah.
So that first level of block detection or track detection, that's universal across railroading. And you'll find that, I think, whatever you're building, for any prototype worldwide, it's that fundamental basis which ties it together. So you'll have different signals, different looking towers, but the idea of the electronic detection or the infrared detection, the way we model it, depending on what you're actually looking at, we go through all the different options for track detection, all the different ways to look at that, and then the logic to build it.
Right.
Everything is laid out clearly, and you should be able to adapt it to any system anywhere in the world pretty simply.
Yeah, nice. For all the budding authors and content creators out there, if copyright is your the niche within the niche of this hobby, and I see content creating as us giving back to the model railroad fraternity. Like myself and like you've had so many different mentors along the way that have given up their information, their knowledge, their expertise without asking anything in return. It's like the old thing, we can only pay it forward. Is this something that you've done so you can pay your, not only a legacy, but you can pay the knowledge you've gained from all those individuals over the years to pay it forward to the next generation of modelers.
100%, 100%. I grew up in a service oriented family. Certainly there's opportunities for, an extra pay channel or for, content behind a firewall like Kalmbach is doing now with trains.com. You want to pay for good content, but there's also something to be said for making this stuff accessible to everyone, because, as humans, we need connection, and as the world gets smaller, but as social media gets larger, you can go down your own rabbit hole every day and never pay attention to what's going on around you. And railroading, by its nature, it was the industry that pushed the technology 150 years ago. It was the reason telegraphs became viable. It was the reason telephones got created. You look at the legacy of the railroad and communications, people working together, and it's very much a part of the energy of railroading and what makes it fascinating today.
Sure.
So, when you combine that with the time and the energy and the passion that's communicated to me by the Jerry Diedzigs of the world, by Tony Custer, by Lionel Strang, who's been a very close friend in the last year and guiding me through some of the getting used to how to handle some of the success. I don't know that I expected it to be this catching on this quickly. It's certainly a lot of fun. I'm loving riding this wave of energy.
Yeah.
But to do it, because I was a lonely, nerdy kid in middle school, and even with good friends, it's a lonely ride sometimes when everybody else seems to be cool and everybody else knows how to act in situations. And my favorite hobby, I had one friend, and I didn't even realize that there was a bigger world out there. I didn't see a way to talk to the people in model railroad, or a way to talk to the people that were doing these craftsman level articles in RMC. So the opportunity to do the Facebook Live and to share what we've created in on the OC and in the energy of these sessions, to share that with the world, to share that with people that find it compelling, it's a dream come true in a lot of ways. It really is an opportunity, I think, to offer that energy to everyone that wants to be part of it. And the Facebook Live is a great platform because it allows people to comment.
Yeah.
It allows people to jump in and joke around. And my neighbor Jeff Schweihart, who never thought twice about trains. Yeah. Now he doesn't miss a session, and he's like, "Take your shirt off." He's like, he's always that guy, And he's the best of the ball busters. So, and it's that kind of energy that I love that we've created. So to pay that forward, to share it, and to allow everyone to tap into that and get a chuckle out of it, I think is a really important part of the hobby these days. And going forward, I'm excited to continue all of it.
Yeah. Okay, so for all the budding authors out there, we sort of touched on it very briefly. If this is something that they want to do, where do you suggest they start? Obviously, you can't expect to be writing a book for Kalmbach Book Publications right from the get-go. You can't expect Front Page, Model Railroad are the two biggest publications in the hobby. Where do you suggest people should start to get noticed, writing their stories, writing their ideas?
I think there's two ways to do it. And the writing side, I really do recommend starting yourself a blog, an online sort of platform. Probably not Facebook, because the problem with Facebook is great for parts of the whole thing. But the problem with Facebook is that it's easy come, easy go. Yeah. So these essays get written and they're up there, but then as soon as the next essay comes, they go down. Yeah. And a week later, there's the searching function on Facebook I find to be very weak. Yeah. So I would recommend, and the way I do it for the OC and the way I started it was at blogspot.com. Yeah. But there's other online packages available to do it. There's Patreon, there's Werribee, there's a bunch of different ways you can go. But the idea behind a blog is that you can develop a little bit of writer's discipline where twice a month you put together a little story, and you put it out there for the masses to read. Yeah. And you can advertise that on Facebook. You can advertise that, or you can email your buddies, and you can start to get feedback from the public on what you're writing. Yeah. And it's okay to ask for people to read it and say, tell me what doesn't work about this. Yeah. And some of that, because writing is right. This is one of the things I think it's important about writing is that you're a sort of a conduit for a higher energy. I don't remember a lot of what I write. When
Yeah,
I get started and I'll go and I'll read it, I'll be like, wow, I don't remember having that thought in that passage, but I really like how this came out. Or, oh man, I don't even know what I was talking about. I got to scramble the eggs and move things around. You know, doing it digitally is a wonderful help because you can just copy and paste so simply.
Sure.
But I think the blog is a nice way to do it. It's searchable by date. You can add keywords and you can search on the different keywords. And it gives you a platform on which to start to
Sure.
put the rubber on the road, as they say.
Yeah.
And I highly recommend starting with a blog and ask your friends and your wisdom keepers to take a look at it. And every once in a while, you're going to write something that has some legs.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of stuff that you would send to an Otto Von Drack, or you would send to, the editor at modelrailroader.mag. And, there's submission channels. And yes, you're one of many sending things in, but as you keep trying, you're not going to get it on your first try.
No.
It takes time to get yourself up to the point where you can produce something that's seamless.
Yeah, sure. I know I'm just started getting into the writing side of things. If I put everything through what I call my grammar nanny, my wife, if she can understand it, it's good to go just about.
Likewise, mate. My wife herself is she's a big reader.
Yeah.
She actually has a college degree in English, which makes
nice.
her a much better reader than I am.
Yeah.
But sure enough, she's a wonderful proofreader and she'll be able to do it in a way that makes some sense, which is nice.
Yeah. So I've written 4 articles. You might not have heard of it. It's called the Modeller's Journal e-magazine, which is more. It's not more just model trains. It's more of a modelling in general. I've written a few articles. They're only 2,000 or 3,000 words, but I've quite enjoyed that. That's sort of, it comes out each quarter. So I've written, my latest one is a 2-part series on remote operations. That was quite interesting because I've dived right into how I've done that within Train Controller. So that's been a bit of fun. I think that's probably my lot in life at this point in time. I don't think I'm ready for the model railroader side of things, or do I have the time is the next thing. But so is that sort of something that you can suggest? If you've said sort of jump up to your Otto Von Dracks, obviously you're getting up to the pinnacle publications here now, or do you sort of increment your way up? So as I said, I'm Modeller's Journal, which is a smaller publication, a lot smaller publication, obviously, and then
that's a great way to start. Yeah, that's a great way to start. And in fact, I appreciate you bringing that up. Another avenue is your local NMRA, your regionals. Most of them have some sort of monthly publication, that comes and goes. And those NMRA regional publications tend to be looking for content. There's or local historical society. If you have a historical society for your favorite railroad, often they've got something. White River does a bunch of publications there. And those are a good way to get out there. And again, see your name in print, see how it comes out, and compare your work to others. And it's all about a learning process.
Yeah.
I still have so much to learn with this and about refining it. And you look at the way a Jerry Dietzick or a Tony Custer, the monthly columnist, Jason Schron, who's become a very good writer, in Otto Von Drack's world with RMC. I look forward to what he writes every month, and I review it and compare it to what I'm doing, because these guys are the leaders in the hobby, and there's a lot of people that have done it well for a long time.
Yeah. No.
So really, really exciting.
Yeah, definitely. Start of a new career, do you think?
Perhaps. I don't know that there's enough money in it to float the family payroll.
No.
So I think I got to stick with my day job. But one of the nice parts about it, about an hour commute on the train to and from work as the pandemic reopens here, is that's where a good chunk of Signals and Interlockings was on the commute.
Right.
And we'll be doing that again here for the yard book here going forward, hopefully, God willing.
Nice. So how many books do you think you got in you? Keep going until you can't go anymore?
I think I will. Again, it's, part of paying it forward is pushing myself. I didn't imagine to be writing books for years. I thought that was something maybe I would get to that later in life, but I don't have the time for it. I don't have the experience to do it. But you don't get to choose the timing sometimes. And when everything came together with this first opportunity, I gave it everything I had.
Yeah.
And again, that was the right approach. You sort of you take a leap of faith to some degree. Am I going to be able to measure up to to Tony's expectations and to Model Railroaders' expectations? And I think it worked out really, really well. So I learned a lot, and I'm certainly excited about the yard book. Not the least of which is the fact that yards, I think, are far more universal in model railroading than signals are.
Yeah, sure.
So I think there'll be a lot of traction for a yard book that looks at yards from a modern view. And how do you look at staging? How do you conceptualize the size of the yard you want on your model railroad? How does that relate to passenger operations versus freight? Where do you put your engine yard and why?
Yeah.
These are all questions that we can discuss. And I think it'll be a much more widely ranging book. It's far less technical than Signals. And that's going to give me a little time to be a little more philosophical with the whole idea, which I'm really excited about. I think there's a lot to share to sort of weave that web together. So I certainly hope to keep going. And we'll see where the appetite is going forward. But Signals first, yard second. Maybe someday we could write a transportation planning book. Maybe we could write a book about how do you share your content. These are all different opportunities for us. And so exciting stuff.
Or even remote operations one day.
Perhaps remote operations, yeah.
I haven't touched on the term Uncle Dave. I'll leave that for another podcast. I just wanted to end on that point because I think, everyone's got an uncle that tells a fantastic story. Just back on the yard book, just quickly, I suppose the more content, the more you can write about, can make it more difficult as well because you need to compress that into the most one logical, readable, digestible book, I suppose. You can't be writing 50,000 words.
Correct, yeah. So. And Kalmbach they're very strict on their page limits. They have a vision for their work, and they're the lion in the cage. So they make the decisions, and as a writer, you have to find a way to make your work fit what they expect. But 35,000 words is a lot. I think we end even with my captions. I believe that what I submitted for Signals was about 36,000 words.
Wow.
And that involved. But I was able to make a case to add the appendix that we put on, which was Jeff Wilson's article on scratch building an actual mechanical interlocking machine.
Right.
And I thought the point that I made was that with half of MR's readership being in the transition era, a mechanical interlocker was really critical for that market, for the 50% of the people that were looking not to do a computer control, but a little manual interlocking machine that could talk to a computer chip under the railroad, and then you simulate that mechanical approach to things.
Yeah, sure.
And so it was a compelling enough case that Carl made the decision to go ahead, and Eric said, "I can't believe it, but here we go." And so it's a longer book than I think than anybody expected on this side of things when we got started. The yard book I don't think will be as long, but I'm gonna see where the spirit takes me, or the writer's energy, and we'll create something compelling, and we'll get it out for some proofreads, and we'll see. I think, looking at past yard books, there's people that touch on staging in certain books. There's people that touch on freight yards and freight yard operation in certain books. There's not a lot of people that touch on it from a prototype standpoint. And I think there's a lot of energy out there to take a look at passengers versus, car float versus classification versus blocking versus intermodal. I mean, that's a whole new category that's come up in the last 25 or 30 years.
Yeah.
Looking at staging and how does staging relate to these yard operations? There's a lot of compelling stuff. And I think if we do it right, I think Kalmbach in a yard book that I put together will have a single best yard book that's ever been put together.
Yeah, nice.
From a subject matter standpoint. And hopefully I can write it in a way that's also the best.
Yeah, nice.
We'll see. Again, there's a lot to learn, but there's a lot of wisdom out there that you can draw from, and I think that's one of my strengths is being able to get the right people involved.
Yeah, sure. I think it's also important, and I like to try to do this. We've touched on this briefly. A big shout out to our awesome wives and our partners, if it's a partner, significant others, like Nancy, who's my wife, Kristen, your wife, who allow us the time to sit away from the family like they are today. Take money out of our personal budgets to pursue
Amen.
our hobby, which is significant in this hobby, and also time away from the family as I just like to sort of touch on that briefly. I think it's a nice fitting way, and probably including she obviously, Kristen's read your book.
Mm-hmm.
And it's time away from her and also your lovely kids. And I think that needs to be acknowledged. And I think it's
a central point, Daz, and I appreciate you bringing that up and this is something when you read the acknowledgements in the book, I really tried to make that point.
Yeah.
Because just like, we were talking about foundations of the signal system before, and that block detection, which is so universal across so many different kinds of railroading worldwide. Well, I think it's really important to remember that the family, the spouse, the partner, that's the foundation of civilization worldwide.
Yeah.
There's not a civilization in this world that doesn't look up to family, that doesn't value family.
Yeah.
And I feel so grateful and so fortunate to have found such a wonderful woman that shares that vision and that is so gracious, so that even after a crazy long holiday weekend, July 4th, the Independence Day holiday here in America, we're all maxed out. I still have to put the tap system away. It's getting late at night. I got to go out and put the garbage out.
Yeah.
But Kristen says, "Oh, go ahead. Go ahead. I enjoy it. I'll take care of cleaning up tonight." And it was so the foundation of humanity, which is the family in so many ways, and the love that we share, not just for a spouse or a partner, but also for a mate, a best buddy, a great friend, for other people we're meeting in the hobby. I mean, I feel like I know you guys more than I would have ever thought just through the internet.
Yeah.
And it'll be a handshake when we meet, but it's also going to be a hug, buddy. There's just no way about it.
I like a good man hug.
Yes, amen. But I mean, what a wonderful time we live in, where these kind of connections are not just possible, but are becoming more common. And to have women and family that support it and that like to be part of it, it's a breath of fresh air. It's the foundation upon which all of my creative ability is founded. Because without Kristen and the kids, I don't think I have a stable foundation on which to write.
Yeah.
So
definitely.
I really feel very, very grateful.
Yeah,
I really
definitely.
do.
Big thank you if you can thank your lovely family for allowing this over an hour now, for chatting with me on Model Railroad Techniques today. It's been a pleasure. My mind's boggling with some of the stuff we've spoken about, and I'm sure I'll reach out again, but love to be involved in running the OC at some stage from my neck of the woods. As I said, I won't try to do a Marty Jenkins.
Dad, count on it. There's a few people that are interested in doing some remote, so we're going to do a remote training session at some point this summer. We'll pick a night,
that'd be good.
and we'll find a way to just kick the rust off a little bit so that people can get a flavor for it.
Yeah.
And so count on it. We'll be moving forward together.
Yeah, that'd be great. And it's been such an enjoyable chat, and God bless to you and your family.
Best wishes, my friend. Take care, mate.
Thank you very much.
Yep. Bye-bye.
Make sure you subscribe, click that little bell icon to be notified of upcoming videos. Support us on Patreon, like us on Facebook and Instagram at Model Railroad Techniques.